Hey there, everybody. It's me, Crimson Rosso, and I have returned to talking about the Trails series once again. Now, before we get into this review, I want to say sorry for taking so long with my Azure review. It was a mix of work during Christmas time, finally playing hard mode for the first ever time in the series, which I will never do again, and some burnout on Trails itself that kept me from getting it done faster. But with two of those three things being easier now, I could finally get this done. Now, Azure is a very interesting title to me, as I personally think it has some of the highest highs Trails has ever shown me, but I also think it's home to some of the lowest lows it's had. And what exactly caused both of those? Well, how about we find out? Before we begin, I'm just going to say this. My reviews are going to be entering a different format with this. I'm going to be going into some spoilers for Azure in both pros and cons section, because I can't really talk about my issues and also what I loved about it unless I mention those. I'm going to be as tight-lipped as I usually try to be, but just know my pros and cons will have some spoilers in them. Alright, we good? Let's get into this. Okay, so in order to start off this list of pros, I want to go over what things have been improved in comparison to Zero. And the biggest, to me at least, is the PNGs. Now, I was pretty critical of the new art style's lack of emotion in the first title, and to be honest, while there isn't some ginormous level of change here, it's nice to see the improvements on the amount of expressions you see in Azure. Some characters like Randy now have completely new PNGs in addition to their older ones. It's not a perfect change, but the fact they even addressed it made me happy in the first place. That's pretty much the only graphical style change they do, which, makes sense considering the game already looked really good. It still has the AI upscaling issues Zero had, but, it's far less noticeable now, so I'm guessing they learned how to hide it a lot better. Well, that, and I was probably distracted by the improvements to the game's combat, which is something we'll be talking about now. See, just like how Zero chose to add in new mechanics to the combat, like attacking enemies to stun, and of course the goated as fuck dual S-crafts, Azure now introduces two all-new mechanics. The first being the Master Quartz system, which functions quite differently from your normal quartz, as when it's equipped, you gain an immediate buff to your character, whether it be a 25% increase to strength or defense, increasing your critical hit ratio in battle, having a higher chance of preventing ailments, or increase healing spell potency, and several more. The Master Quartz were honestly my favorite addition to the gameplay, as this allowed you to experiment with various types of builds even more than before. Do you want to make Lloyd into an evasion tank with your normal quartz? Well, how about you equip a Master Quartz that boosts his strength for a few turns? Or maybe you made Tio into a healer and decide you want her to gain a speed boost in battle. Here's a Master Quartz for that. Or do you want to take your strength build to the next level with Randy and equip the Strength Master Quartz to Randy and just go fucking nuts, baby? I love this extra layer of thought to it, especially when you get them to max level, because that's when you unlock the true power of these quartz. And that's the Master Arts, which are very powerful arts that can be game changers if you utilize them right. An example is the Healing Quartz gives you a 50% boost to your HP, which can come in clutch with some boss fights in the later game if needed. Which, if you played on harder difficulties like I was dumb enough to, you will definitely need them. But you see, that's just the quartz. What else has been changed? Well, now we have access to a new technique called Burst, wherein you fill up a bar at the top right of the screen, and once it's full, you can unleash a furious set of turns that not only let you deal damage with no pushback from the enemy, and even cast spells with absolutely no downtime, but every turn lets every party member gain free CP. It's a dope new sort of trump card to have in your back pocket when you just need to turn the tide of battle in your favor, or just get yourself a few free turns to heal and boost your party up with some stat increases. And those were the two biggest add-ons to combat. And now we move on to the final change. And that's how party members are now permanent in this game. In comparison to Zero, where you had them as temporary buds for like a dungeon or two, now characters like Wazzy and Noelle are permanent party members once they join. The exceptions to this system are Estelle, Joshua, and Dudley. Estelle and Joshua for obvious reasons, and Dudley is off doing his own thing that keeps him from being in your party, the same way Wazzy and Noelle were. And I love this, as with them fully in the party, you're not only granted more team building options, but the game itself finally allows you to learn more about these two. They don't just appear, have a few moments, and then leave. They develop alongside everyone else in the SSS throughout its story and its absolute craziness. Speaking of story, how about we start tackling that now, shall we? Now, when it comes to Azure Story, I think I can easily say it is my favorite story they have told in these games so far, and is probably the most ambitious the franchise has had to offer. And that's tied to not only the story, but several members of the cast themselves. See, Azure Story is very much how the game chose to tackle the loose ends that Zero left for it. Questions like, just who exactly is Wazzy? If Randy was a former Jaeger and son of the most dangerous one of them all, what exactly was the group like? And more importantly, what were his family members like? Guy Bannings was killed in the line of duty, but who was the one who ended up doing him in? Why was Rixia an assassin when her and her boobs would be better pressed on my face? All of these were loose ends that were left for Zero's sequel to answer. And Azure answers them all incredibly well in my opinion. You finally get to meet the Jaeger group Randy was a part of, the Red Constellations, and more importantly, his uncle and cousin, who are probably some of my favorite villains so far, due to the fact that they are just a couple of selfish assholes that just want to do whatever they want. They both barely care about anything other than money and fighting. They're just a couple of absolutely, completely bloodthirsty douchebags that make you want nothing more than to kick their teeth in at every opportunity. They're just some of the most entertaining villains we've ever had. This, combined with the mental toll of dealing with their bullshit again and again, actively starts pushing Randy to a breaking point, in turn creating an engaging dynamic with the group. Of course, Randy isn't the only one to get development, as Wazzy and Rixia both get their time in the spotlight as well. Learning of Wazzy's past and discovering that he's not only a secret undercover member of the Septian Church, but he's a fucking Dominion, one of its highest ranking members, was an absolute mindfuck of a twist that I still cannot believe was as well handled as it was. Alongside Wazzy's reveal, we also get to learn why Rixia chose to don the name Yin and continue being an assassin despite her career as a dancer. And while it wasn't exactly as exciting or in-depth as someone like Randy or hell, even Ellie or Tio from the first title, I still think it did a lot for her character and gave her more to work with than just being secret assassin lady. Both Rixia and Wazzy are great. They have some issues that I will get into later, but I think they are both very well done. And with characters talked about, let's get to talking about the story. Well, again, because this time we actually are. Sorry, I won't go on a tangent this time. See, one of the main story beats about Azure is what's known as the Zemuria Trade Conference, a massive event taking place to discuss Crossbell's future after the events of Zero nearly threw it into disarray, and how several world powers want to use said event to turn Crossbell into sort of a seat of power for themselves, with the main threat being Osborne, Arboria's Blood and Iron Chancellor, a man we had only gotten to know through vague discussion and Oliver's Trail's third door, but now you get the full frontal assault of him, baby. He's like an imposing force of nature who views everything like a chess game for him to win. Of course, he's not the only returning threat for the SSS, as Azure brings Ouroboros back into the mix, and we finally get to meet more of its members, something we haven't really gotten outside of that one door section in third. But instead of enforcers, you're dealing with the Agneses, the higher up members of Ouroboros, the group that was basically Weissman's level of importance. There are two you interact with throughout the entire game, the mad scientist Novartis and the Steel Maiden Arenhood. A decision I actually liked a lot, as it was rather nice to finally meet more members of this organization we haven't really seen much appear from outside of Sky Second and Third. And their personalities made them both immensely likable, or immensely hateable if you viewed them as two different people. I'll let you all decide which one is which. Of course, Ouroboros isn't the only return here, as several characters from the Sky Trilogy return as well. And God, seeing them all again just put a giant smile on my face and really added to the intensity that this whole title brought to the table. It really felt like the entire future of this country was riding on your success. Which, well, it was, but it was still cool, god damn it! And of course, it wouldn't be a Trails game without some fantastic as fuck music. My personal favorite is easily Arenhood's theme. It has this sort of beautiful elegance to it that makes you understand she's as beautiful as she is dangerous. There are definitely other themes that I like in this game, but Arenhood's was just so good it got my own shoutouts. And that's all of my pros. I hope I explained why I thought it was so amazing. So, how about I get into why I think it's frustrating? So, I've spent a pretty good amount of time explaining to you why I thought this game was so amazing. So now, it's time for me to tell you why I thought it was kind of frustrating as well. First and foremost, we gotta talk about the bosses of this game. Now, a fun fact I learned about Azure is that it was actually made in only a year, and I gotta give them credit. With how well made it all is, that's very shocking. But not everything was as balanced as I hoped it was. And one of those misbalanced problems are the bosses. Now, there are bosses I like in Azure. The prologue boss is really cool, several of the final dungeon bosses are fucking awesome, and the Chapter 3 Bloody Shirley battle is probably one of my favorite fights so far. But some of these bosses are kind of annoying and just not handled right. First and foremost is the Ice Falcon boss, where you get swarmed by multiple Ice Falcons that look cool, but is ruined by every single hit being an insta-freeze on you that nearly made me tear my hair out. And unlike other titles, you can't just go buy lighters, and you have to instead buy solar pendulums for 4,000 each, which is pretty brutal for being so early in the game. The car boss from Chapter 2 was another one, as while I thought it had some cool attack patterns, its defense is way too high and makes the fight take forever. And while the Campanella fight is pretty funny at how he can turn you into just goofy ass jalapenos, and it is a pretty cool concept that he has an ability to dodge S-crafts by replacing them with one of your party members, his constant jalapeno transformation, plus the ability, I guess, I don't really know if it's magic or not, to randomly just take party members and place them around the arena, got old really fast and made the fight take way longer than I wanted to. And, okay, look, the less I speak about the final boss fight, the better. I could be on this for hours, but I'm just gonna keep my mouth shut about that. Let's just say I wasn't really a fan. With that said, I don't have many other issues with combat, as every other new idea works very well. Now, let's move on to my issue with the story itself. Now, I love the story of Azure from Chapter 2 onwards. I think it's incredible in pretty much every single way you can think of. But that's when Chapter 2 happens. Because Chapter 1 in Trails to Azure is really fucking boring. I genuinely think it's one of the worst chapters we have gotten so far. Why, you may be asking? Simple, because nothing fucking happens. You drag your feet doing a set of mandatory quests that are just some of the most boring so far. The only one that was semi-interesting is the one that reintroduces Lecter. That's just turned into chasing him around Crossbow multiple times, which is just tedious as all hell if I'm being real here. Like I said, it picked up afterwards, but geez, that start was rough. The only really cool part is meeting Randy's family, but that doesn't really happen until like the end of the first chapter. That also isn't really my only issue with story either, as I personally felt like some of the party members weren't as well utilized as they could have been. The OG SSS members are the best they've ever been, so I've got absolutely no issues with them. It's the others I have an issue with, so I'm gonna break them down as much as I can. Risha and Wazi I think are handled the best out of all of them, but are very much hurt by the fact that some of their most important story beats are tied to the final bonding events in-game, meaning in order to fully get their stories, you would need to beat the game twice, while placing every effort into getting their bonding events, which has always been a pretty dumb concept to me in any game I've played, and I'm really not happy that Azure chose to do this. But at least they're in the game, unlike Dudley, who barely gets anything. I was hoping he would have more time in the party after the events of Zero, but nope. He gets about the same screen time as Zero Dudley, which sucks considering how fascinating his relationship with the SSS has been. But none of these, and I mean none, are as bad as how Noelle is handled. Now, see, for the most part, Noelle is a great character. It's more issues with how she's handled in the end game than anywhere else. As when the villain finally begins their plan and has Noelle become the lieutenant of the new police division, and her reason for this is she says she's staying because she is loyal to Crossbell. But this is stupid? I get Noelle is pretty naive, it's one of her best character traits, but she isn't so brain dead she wouldn't be able to see who the very obvious villains are in this situation. They wanted to have this sort of divide in her thoughts about her love for Crossbell and the bond she formed with the SSS, but she just kind of looks like an idiot because of it. It doesn't kill how much I like Noelle as a character, sure, but God, was this just a bad way to take her character? But even though there are some that are underused and some character choices are kind of bad, none of them are anywhere near as bad as how Grimwood was handled. See, it's revealed at the end of the game that while Grimwood has been this kindly, helpful character who everybody loves, Like Gerard the Completionist, that was all a facade, as it's revealed he's working with the enemy. Okay, it's a bit out of nowhere, sure, but hey, maybe with some time he could become something truly I don't even have a joke here. I'm just in pure total fucking shock. You give him this big reveal, and then you just fucking execute him not even like 5 hours later. I have no words other than what the actual fuck. What was even the point of all of this? It's like that one scene from Transformers The Last Night where you get that big Suicide Squad style opening for like Megatron's crew, and then they're executed in like even less time than it took for the montage. That's what this is. This is just the Suicide Squad scene. That's pretty much the end of my cons. I just thought it was super fucking funny that the fact they wanted this guy to be a big twist and he doesn't even get beaten in a fight. He just gets fucking murdered by Mirabelle. God, I was laughing for like a minute straight when that happened. That's all for that, folks. Let's get on to final thoughts. Azure is straight up fantastic. It may actually be my favorite Trails game now that I've finally finished it. But I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Its flaws are very noticeable, and you can tell it needed much more time to cook in the oven. That's why I think my final rating for this game is a super solid 9 out of 10. It would have been a 10 out of 10 if it had had more time, but sadly it didn't. And that's pretty much it for this video. We're finally finished with the Crossbell era, eh? Honestly, it was a blast to play both of these bad boys, and I'm happy my experience was as fun as it was. And to be honest, instead of me saying like and sub now like I usually do, I'd actually like to take a moment to say something else. While playing through this title, I learned from my friend Joey that one of the localizers for this game sadly ended up passing away before he could see the final product. So I wanted to dedicate this time to pay my respect to Daniel Scott, or Kill Scott Kill. Rest in peace, and thank you for everything you worked on to help get this game to the West. Know your efforts were not in vain, and you helped every fan for how hard you had worked. That's all, folks. Have a good one, and I'll see you next time.